Welcome, everyone. My name is Alana Bruton, and I'm the Director of Programs at the Chicago Cultural Alliance. Thank you for joining us for our last session of the Chicago Cultural Alliance's Meeting the Moment. This is a series of free professional development workshops for nonprofits. It's designed to equip cultural and heritage nonprofits with practical tools and strategic insights to navigate today's challenging landscapes for arts and community organizations. This series is made possible with support from MacArthur Foundation and the Chicago Community Trust. Today's session will be recorded and available on the Chicago Cultural Alliance website and YouTube channel. It will also include the slide deck and any resources that are shared. Today's topic is Beyond the Annual Fund, Diversifying Revenue Streams in Today's Nonprofit Environment. And we are joined by Brandi Adams, Chief External Affairs Officer at Envision Unlimited, who brings nearly 2 decades of nonprofit leadership experience. Our other presenter is Warren Frank. He is a retired CFO and CPA and currently a professor at Columbia College. This is our final webinar of the series, but if you're interested in more professional development around finance, fundraising, visit CCA website and YouTube, and you'll find more of these presentations. And finally, we want to hear from you. I encourage you to drop your questions into the Q&A feature, and our panelists will go through these at the end of the presentation. Please join me in welcoming Brandi and Warren to the digital stage.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you, CCA, for the opportunity to present, and hopefully as a group, we will be bringing you things of value that you will take with you. Before Brandi begins, allow me on slide 3 to talk about things that in reality. We have an agenda, and Brandi will go through that, but talking about reality. And one thing I'd like to say is that in my lifetime as a CFO for years over not-for-profits and also as an auditor at KPMG, one of the first comments I want to bring forward to leaders of not-for-profits is to diversify. Okay? Just the same thing that you do if you are investing for your retirement. You try to diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's what my parents taught me years ago, and it's very, very true. In fact, a rule of thumb by accountants and auditors is that you really don't want anything more than 10% coming from one client or one member or one customer. My second after diversification is be an entrepreneur. Pretend the organization is your own company. All right. Don't just put yourself in as an employee. Pretend it's your own company. Do anything to bring in revenues. And of course, I mean ethically, legally, and morally, but do anything to bring in those revenues. Also on this slide, they talk about today's pressures. And many people will say, well, it'll all be done when this administration that's currently in the USA federal administration is gone. Allow me to say that of decades of working, pressures are never gone. All right. It's not going to be like, oh, well, we'll be okay and we'll go back to the old ways. When we talk about inflation nowadays, inflation was over double that amount in the late 70s, early 80s. Let me tell you that when I went out and got loans, bank loans, we got 19% interest rates. Another thing is they talk about, well, the pressures now, we have to cut this, cut that. Yes, but it's not just today. It has been in the past. And in fact, during my lifetime, 2008 through 2010, the Great Recession was as bad as it could possibly get. So be prepared of what can possibly happen, and don't just think today. Be resilient. And before Brandi starts, I just want you to ask yourself some questions that we'll think about now and we'll bring forward later on. For instance, are you prepared to replace assets? Do you have an emergency fund? Not just for something that's, you need money for, but maybe an opportunity exists. Do you know what your financial ratios are? Are you sure that you have the correct cash forecast? So when you're working on all of this, do things that are not just necessarily in your mission. Do things that are out of your mission. Look at additional revenues that we'll talk more about later. And also at the same time, when thinking about additional revenues, also look at what possible expenses are no longer needed. I think with that, Brandi, can you move us on to the next slide?
Of course. So on this slide is just an illustrative version of a organizational budget. And so this is to really illustrate the challenge that a lot of nonprofits are facing, that when we are not strongly diversified in our revenue streams, a hit to any of these revenue sources can be detrimental to the organization. In fact, a lot of organizations, especially in the cultural space and the immigrant support services space, is seeing massive hits and cuts in the government grant space, which is requiring them to either do massive layoffs, like we've seen in an unprecedented way. Lately, the organization Warren and I actually worked for just went through a significant round of layoffs, the largest round of layoffs they've ever had in the history of the organization, due to cuts to their funding and their government grant supports. They weren't prepared for what that would do. We had worked very diligently to diversify the revenue streams, but it wasn't enough because the government grants piece was such a large portion of the budget. So that is not to scare anybody or shock anybody, but it is the reality of the situation that we're in right now. So this is just to illustrate that even a loss of one of these sources can be detrimental to the entire organization. So we really want to look at how we're diversifying. We've got the fundamentals that we want to make sure we're in place for every organization. So our individual giving, especially doubling down on monthly giving. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. A strong major gifts program, our corporate partnerships program, and then our relationships, of course, with foundations. And then the growth engines, which still includes government funding, earned income, events, and then planned giving. So beyond the annual fund and really digging into the individual giving, monthly giving programs should be on everybody's radar. If you're not currently doing a monthly giving program, in addition to a membership or whatever that looks like for your organization, I hope I'm telling you something you already know, that the lifetime value of a monthly giving donor is significantly higher than the major gift donor. Oftentimes, their value to the organization as somebody who is more involved and engaged is higher than the one-time major gift donor. We really want to build a strong monthly giving program. And in fact, at Envision Unlimited this year and for the Giving Tuesdays following, we're focusing our entire Giving Tuesday strategy on acquiring monthly donors. That is where our big focus is going to be. So then the key is, once we have those folks in, ensuring that we're communicating with them the difference that their gifts are making, and really focusing on that stewardship for donor retention. You all know this. It is so much cheaper to retain donors than it is to continually acquire them. So ensuring that we've got the donor processes in place, donor journeys in place, to make sure that every one of our donors feels that they are part of the mission of our organization and that they are making this mission happen is critical in keeping those donors as part of our organizational engine.
And Brandi, think about what you already do, and that everybody should be thinking about cash flow. And if you even out the money coming in, it is a lot easier to make sure that you make payroll, make sure that you make the rent and things of that sort. So again, monthly giving kind of spreads out the money coming in.
Yep, absolutely. Mid-level giving is an area that's continuing to grow in our industry. Oftentimes, organizations focus on those major gifts, and then they focus on the bottom of the pyramid, where they're trying to get as many people aware of the organization as possible, and then they're trying to get people in that top tier of major gift donors. And oftentimes, that mid-level giving donor section is often overlooked. It's not given the attention that it needs. Those are the folks that are oftentimes sustaining the organization. They're the ones that are the most reliable givers, and they are going to be your future major gift donors. So what we're seeing as a big trend in the industry is actually more investment in that mid-level giving. We're seeing instead of these massive hires of major gift officers, more investment in staff positions that are really stewarding and focusing on that mid-level giving. Digital acquisition and peer-to-peer, especially with the younger generations coming into this space. Oftentimes what we hear when we talk about five generations, we often hear about it from an HR perspective, that there's five generations in the workforce, but that also means there's five generations in the philanthropy space as well. And all of those generations give differently and interact with your agency differently. So it is critical that you are meeting these individuals where they are. I was at the Bridge conference out on the East Coast recently and sat in on a NAMI presentation that they had done about engaging with younger donors. And one of the key takeaways for me is that one of their associate board members was talking about the fact that she had surveyed a group of 10 of her peers and asked them what organizations they had given to in the last year. And all of them said, well, I haven't given to any organization in the last year, but at least six of them had given to a type of GoFundMe event because a friend of theirs had asked them to do it. So peer-to-peer opportunities is going to continue to be a critical opportunity for individual giving in engaging these younger generations as well.
Yeah, teaching at Columbia with 20-year-olds to 22-year-olds, and I teach also a vendor funding course. And that's two areas that we focus on tremendously. And the students relish that and they understand that more so than they do the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
You say, oh, don't forget this, but they go, yeah, but the digital stuff, the peer-to-peer, GoFundMe, yes.
So the younger generations, there's also more data coming out that they actually love direct mail too. So direct mail is not dead in our space. It's actually having a resurgence because the Gen Y and Gen Z populations, they don't typically get mail. So as long as we're mailing them something with a digital component that they can then engage with and give, that is the kind of the win-win for engaging them from what we're learning. But back to monthly giving. So as Warren was saying, predictable income changes everything for an organization. Monthly giving delivers higher donor retention, better lifetime value, and lower fundraising costs. So this example, $500 donors giving $25 generates $150,000 a year without investing a single dollar in trying to acquire a new donor. So do not overlook your donors that are consistently giving. We actually have conversations too with the donors who are giving, a $250 gift at one time. I go back and have conversations with them about becoming a $25 a month monthly donor. And many times they'll say, well, I can actually afford to give $30 or $40 a month. And it makes it that much more palatable for them to give. And they end up giving much more in an annual time frame than what they were doing with their one-time gift. So it feels like a win-win for them for sure. Major gifts, again, this is all, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these pieces because I know there's been other sessions about the individual giving pieces of it. So these are obviously just the basics of the major gifts. Major gifts, you all should know, are very relationship based. For in my over 20 years of being in this industry, I've never heard of anybody waking up one day and deciding they're going to give their entire wealth away to a nonprofit they've never been involved with before. They don't know anybody that's a part of. It is all based on relationships. So again, people give to people, not appeals. So make sure you're building those relationships with not even the current major donors in your database, but who have the potential, who has the passion for your organization and your mission, and who has that capacity to give at that major giving level, and understanding that this is one of those investments that you have to make because it oftentimes takes years to see it come to fruition. So this is one of those baseline foundations that you're doing constantly in the background while you're also doing these other activities to generate more immediate income.
And by the way, if you've not given, I'm sorry, if you've not gone and said thank you to those major gift donors, start now. It's never too late to go back and say thank you. Don't feel badly, well, I haven't talked to that person for a year or 2 years. You got to ask, and you got to go back and thank them again.
Corporate partnerships. So one of the big trends that we've done at the last couple of organizations that I've been with is really transition away from the popcorn sponsorships and really designing annual partnerships of we ask them one time for a gift that produces benefits for their corporation throughout the year. It includes benefits to things like the gala, the golf outing, whatever your organization may have, but it's a one-time ask. And it includes the business value that we as an organization can bring to their company. So it, of course, like anything, and that's the one through piece that I want to make sure everybody hears is that things have changed in this industry, and it doesn't matter if you're working with an individual donor, a corporate partnership, a foundation, everything revolves around relationships. There is so much competition for the same dollars that everything revolves around relationships. So the critical piece of building corporate partnerships is to first have those listening conversations where you're trying to understand more what challenges that corporation is trying to address within their BRGs, within their ERGs, whatever they call them. What are they trying to make better within their workplace? And then understanding how you can help fill those gaps and present that opportunity. The days of just giving to an organization because it's a good organization are long gone. And in fact, they've been that way for a long time. When I was with United Way and American Heart Association in Northwest Indiana, there's multiple large steel mills over there, and they had actually gotten to the point where they chose 4 organizations. They worked with staff and chose 4 organizations that were the only organizations that they gave to. And the reason was they were getting upwards of 500 requests a month for people to donate to their organization, to sponsor their XYZ. And it just was becoming way too cumbersome for them. So the fact that we had done our due diligence, we had built relationships with the folks who were making those decisions. We at both United Way and American Heart Association were included in those 4 entities that they built partnerships with throughout each year. But we also helped meet needs. We did CPR training with the staff that were there. And we're approaching it the same way at Envision Unlimited. So one of our big pieces that we offer as a business value to companies that we're working with is we have mental health first aid certifications. So we actually have trainers that can go into your corporation and train your staff in mental health first aid to recognize when somebody visiting your company or one of your employees is having or on the brink of a mental health crisis and what to do, how to intervene in a safe and appropriate way, what the resources are to ensure that this individual is taken care of and gotten to the appropriate places that they need to get the support and help that they need. So that is a value add that we bring to the table as part of that partnership package versus just saying, hey, it's that time again. You've always sponsored our gala. Can we put your name on our signage again? So again, what business value is your organization bringing and what problem are you helping them solve? Again, these are also just kind of the foundational things, employee engagement. This is one of the big things I've told all of my staff, and I tell my executive leadership team and our boards that even if we can't get into a corporation at the very top level, if we can't get meetings with the C-suite of an organization, if we can get meetings with their ERGs, if we can get people who are passionate and boots on the ground, level people, more and more companies are asking for employee input on what organizations or causes they should be involved with. So by building an army of advocates, even at lower levels within a corporation, you amplify your impact, because when it comes time for those conversations, if you have 10 to 15 people saying, I think we should support XYZ because I've been volunteering there and they have great programming, versus you've spent the last 3 years trying to get in with their chief diversity officer or whatever position you've been trying to get into, you can move the needle much quicker building an army of advocates than you can continuing to knock on closed doors. Cause marketing is also a huge opportunity. And then, of course, the more you can get leadership engaged, if they're engaged from the get-go, that's, of course, a win for both parties. Foundations, again, like I mentioned, building the relationships before applying, understanding the funder priorities and ensuring that you align with them. And we're actually in the process of doing a education campaign with foundations in the Chicagoland area as far as the population that we serve goes. We are an organization that serves individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. However, this population is never included in the populations that are described when foundations talk about serving marginalized communities or underserved communities. And in fact, the IDD community has significantly higher numbers of Black and Hispanic and Latinx communities or members. And so we're doing a lot of education to help the funders understand that by not including the IDD population in the populations that they're talking about serving, it's actually doing a huge disservice to this largely marginalized population. So it's okay to take some of those risks and share. And in fact, I had a meeting with Chicago Community Trust the other day, and the individual that I was meeting with said, I never even thought of that. And it was an eye-opening experience for him to understand the numbers of how disproportionately affected Black and Brown communities are with IDD diagnoses, because oftentimes folks don't have access to proper nutrition, proper prenatal care that can exacerbate IDD symptoms, or early interventions that can help minimize the effects of an IDD diagnosis down the road. So take those opportunities to also educate on the work that you do. If you're not finding funders that are aligning with the work that you do, but you know your mission and you know the importance of it. So definitely take the opportunity to do that. And think beyond 1 year grants. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Oftentimes the small 1 year grants require so much more work than the large annual or large multi-year grants. So definitely want to propose multi-year opportunities when it's available. Government funding, this is one of those proceed with caution opportunities to look at for sure. State tends to be a little easier than federal for sure. Most of in every organization that I've worked, when there's federal grants involved, oftentimes that becomes administering those grants becomes a full-time position in and of itself. So there's a lot to be aware of. Even with state grants, one of the things that we've run into recently is state systems are oftentimes antiquated and outdated and face a lot of their own challenges, but they still hold you to deadlines regardless of how their systems are working. And so in our space, we've actually seen people that have been receiving the same state grants for decades be denied grants this year because the state system was down and they were 45 minutes late past a deadline and submitting grants. So just it's one of those things that they're necessary. They come with their own challenges. So just it's a proceed with caution and make sure that it is, again, you're diversifying. It's not your only or your strongest or largest line of revenue.
And look at the local too. I mean, people say, "Oh, everything's federal," and then they'll say, "Okay, well, it's state." Well, there's counties, there's cities, there's a lot of things that funding comes along that people tend to forget. And so jog yourself and say, "Okay, what else is out there?" And track, as that bullet point said back there, track the political climate because it is different. Just think about it, how different it is in Chicago than it is in Cook County, than it is in Illinois, than it is nationally.
Yep. And even look at opportunities with state offices. So, or as Warren was saying, local offices. So one of our public grants that we get is through we have a mental health facility in Springfield, and we actually get a grant through the Springfield Police Department, that is part of the state funds that they receive to continue with the mental health work that we do in that space because of the work that we're doing down there, they're receiving less phone calls, they're receiving less calls to come out for disruptions, things along that line. So they actually fund part of the programmatic work that we're doing in that space because it's reducing the challenges that they're having to deal with. So it definitely look in some innovative and creative spaces where you might not think there would be. All right. Warren, you want to talk about some earned revenue?
Yes, please. Uh, I guess I would allow me to ask each one of you, what else that is not necessarily in your mission that you can bring in additional revenues? What else do you have? What expertise do you have? What experts do you have? Do you have people that are HR experts, accounting experts, finance experts? Do you have people within your own organization? And I guess then I would ask, if you do, what services can they offer others? I mean, let's admit it, every organization needs to know employment law, right? Every organization needs to have a bookkeeper or an accountant, balance the books and make sure payroll gets paid. Can you do some of that? Are you able to do some of that? I know that working at not-for-profits, I and others in the accounting finance area would do things like that for members or whatever to bring in some additional revenue. No, it's not going to change the world, but every dollar counts. And one thing that I want to make sure that you keep in mind when you're bringing in any other type of revenues is to make sure that you do catch and know what the expenses are going to be. So I'd say, well, I'm going to bring in an extra, $5,000, but it could cost more. So do that bookkeeping. We mentioned here, and I don't want to necessarily read the stuff that people do, but when we talk about space, on the next slide, we talk about space and what we can do. What are some of our hidden assets? Both Brandi and I have some examples. I have in one company, we had excess space in classrooms. We had excess space in training rooms. And what we did was we utilized an outside source and we put things on the market, on the internet, and we're able to bring in people that said, oh, I could use that space. Because if you're not using it and you have a long-term lease and you can't get out of it, why not at least try to figure out what revenue can come in? Because usually the expenses are fixed and it's not any, shall we say, additional expenses. In my own neighborhood in Lakeview, there's a school that's on Broadway. And what do they do every Saturday from April through November? They rent out that space for a farmer's market every Saturday. So who would have thought of that? My gosh, this empty parking lot, which is sort of also part of a playground, and they're utilizing that space. What other examples do you have, Dave?
In one of our day program centers, we had actually received funding to build a kitchen as part of our education with the folks that we support. So one of our big initiatives is building up as much independence in the individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities as possible. And part of that is learning to cook and learning to be able to provide meals for yourselves. Well, while those classes weren't this, we had this beautiful state-of-the-art commercial kitchen, thanks to this grant we had received. And those classes took place for about an hour, hour and a half a day for 5 days. And during the rest of the week, that space sat empty. And so we actually worked with the program staff and developed just a commercial kitchen rental opportunity for the up and coming what's the incubator new food businesses that were in the incubator space. So there's a cookie company called Sweet Shot that the cookies it's here in Chicago. The cookies all have some kind of alcohol theme if that's your jam. But that started in the commercial kitchen space in one of our day programs. And there's a plethora of other companies that have started their and they actually hired some of the folks that we support to help them get ready for farmers markets and things like that that they were building their brand at. And then they actually some of them still support and have hired a few of the individuals that we support as well. So just looking at the things that we have that are just sitting empty that really weren't going to cost us any additional funds. I think the most expensive it got was we added a code keypad on the door so that if they wanted to come in after hours, but it's locked off from the rest of the building. So they had a keypad to get into just the kitchen. So we didn't have to hire security. We knew based on who was using the code, coming in and out, who was in the space at the time. So it was a fantastic opportunity for us to increase a revenue stream and put a space that was typically just sitting empty to use and help build small business community at the same time.
So we challenge you to look as though you're an entrepreneur, to be able to say, what else can I possibly do with renting your space, as these slides say, and as Brandi just talked about the kitchens. And again, if things are empty, and it doesn't have to be just evenings and weekends, it can be during the day. I mean, you still might have excess space for a lease that maybe has 3 to 5 more years to go. So think about that. Think about all those types of things that you can possibly do. And maybe when you ask some questions, bring it forth to all of us so we can help answer those types of questions.
I would also think innovatively too, even if you don't necessarily have parking space near a big event or a big thing that's happening. Can you build a partnership with somebody in that space that does? So for an example for that, when I was with United Way in Northwest Indiana, Three Floyds, if you're a beer drinker, Three Floyds has something called Dark Lord Day, where they release their Warren, you're a beer drinker. It's some type of special beer that they release on Dark Lord Day. And there's a new can design every year, but thousands of people come to this event. We were miles down the road from that, but one of our corporate partners had their office building was right next to Three Floyds. And so I talked to them about parking is always a huge challenge that day. And I asked, it always happened on a Saturday, so they weren't using their parking lot that day. And I pitched to them, what if, as a fundraiser for United Way, we sold your parking lot? We rented out parking lot spaces for people who were coming to Dark Lord Day, and then that revenue was donated to United Way. And it became a huge fundraiser for us. And they actually ended up making it part of their corporate engagement. Their teams from Indianapolis would come up. They would do a match for the day. They had people out there grilling food and selling hot dogs. They turned it into actually a big company event that brought a lot of their company people together. So it was a really neat, innovative way to look at something that was already there and think, how could we make this work for us and bring some recognition too to the work that we're doing in that moment. So there you go, rent your parking lot.
You want to take the
Yeah.
annual fund?
So rent your expertise. One of the things that we're currently doing at Envision Unlimited is we are designing training modules. Everybody who is a direct support professional, so those are the individuals that are working, kind of the boots on the ground folks that are working with the individuals that we support. Everyone in the United States who is in a direct support professional role has to go through a variety of trainings. And most of the time, they're going through the basic, like how to keep the folks we support safe, things along that line. And one of the things that Envision Unlimited has done really, really well is not only how to keep the individuals we support safe, but how are we helping them lead self-guided, self-directed lives? Oftentimes, this particular population is living a life that is designed for them. They're told what they can do, they're told what they're capable of, and they never have the opportunity to say, this is actually what I want to do in my life because they're put in a box by the majority of society. Our staff, we train to really work with the individuals that we support to help them understand what they enjoy, what brings them just joy in life, what they find fulfilling, what we see them really thriving at. And so we're designing trainings to help move from this is how you make sure our folks stay alive to this is how you help the folks you support build a life. And that is a key difference. And so that's one of the ways we're turning our expertise into a profitable revenue source for us. It's something we're already doing. We have a board member who has a multimedia film company that does commercials and trainings already, and he's volunteered his expertise and skills to actually create the videos for us. So it was an opportunity just sitting right there for us to be able to expand that and create a revenue stream for us, but also expand what we know will ultimately improve individuals with IDD's lives. On the flip side of that, one of the things we've been doing a lot here in the city of Chicago is our our folks have a variety of mobility challenges, understanding challenges, things along that line. And so we've actually been partnering with a lot of public institutions and organizations, museums, things along that line to have our individuals that we support go into these different institutions. Chicago Art Museum is one of them, where our folks will go in and train new employees on how to interact with visitors who may have a disability or who may have a developmental disability. We've also been a part of some redesigns or some new exhibits that have been put in place at different places where our folks will come in and walk through the exhibit or walk through the design to make sure everything is accessible and functional for somebody who may have a variety of mobility challenges. That our folks that we support get paid to do that. So it's a revenue generator for them, but it allows other organizations and companies to see what expertise we can bring to the table and why they should partner with us in that area as well. I would also look at if there are any of these areas that you feel your organization is really strongly or functions really strongly in. We're seeing also a lot of small organizations move into shared services spaces with these type of administrative functions. Administrative functions get really expensive for nonprofits. So if there's an opportunity for you to partner with other organizations and look at is there a chance for our HR and compliance team to be centralized and support multiple organizations? We're seeing more and more of that happen in the nonprofit space as well.
Again, controlling your expenses.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just as a training institute, you can do certifications and professional development programs, conferences, workshops, and webinars. as you're participating in today, and then registration fees. Also, too, when you charge registration fees, you typically have a higher attendance rate because once people put their own money on the line, they typically attend things. Again, making sure you're licensing your intellectual property. So that'll be a part of the process of what we're doing. We also have an attorney on our board who has offered to make sure we're licensing all of our trainings appropriately. And then we will be hitting the pavement and selling these to other organizations across the country, which not only generates revenue, but also builds brand awareness for us as an organization. And we're an organization that's in the process of building our merger and acquisition strategy. So the more organizations that know about us, even in this type of space, and see the type of work that we're doing, it benefits us in that way as well. You all are very familiar with membership models, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. Selling experiences, of course, this is another fantastic opportunity for cultural organizations to be a part of. Creative revenue. So this is an opportunity for you all to think about just assets and things that you have in your space. Think about what you have that could become a revenue generator without much expense added. That's going to be the key piece of it every time. And Warren's going to harp on that a lot is you can't add a revenue stream that also adds an equal amount of expense and it be beneficial to the organization in most instances. So making sure you're thinking through that innovatively, creatively, but also looking at the hard numbers of what is this going to cost us to actually do.
We're not going to necessarily talk about specifics, but naming rights. Think about what the cost is for a naming right. A plaque.
Right.
A plaque. That's about it. And those plaques come fairly inexpensive. You can have a plaque for your boardroom. You can have a plaque for a training room. You can have a plaque for a classroom. You can have a plaque out in the lobby area. People like to put their names on things, and it's not millions of dollars, but an extra $5,000 to have a plaque that's going to be up there for 3 years is $5,000 minus the $100 for the plaque.
My last organization, I sold our boardroom for $300,000 and it cost us $150 and a plaque. So
and the effort of somebody nailing the plaque on the wall.
Right. So naming rights is a huge one. I actually just consulted with another organization earlier this week who has a number of fantastic spaces and they've never thought about naming rights. And so that is a huge opportunity there if that's not something you're already doing. Events in my mind should always be looked at as fundraisers. The most important thing in an event is what you do afterward. It's the stewarding, and making sure that you're pulling people into the organization after they attend the event. You are looking at measuring. In my mind, we measure how they engage afterward. An event is really just to get people hooked, and then it's our job. Everything that happens afterward is how they stay connected to the organization. So again, and I'm going to start kind of pushing us through because I know we want to leave time for questions. So as Warren said earlier, thinking like an entrepreneur. And I think the biggest piece of this is understanding that it's everybody in the organization's job. This does not lie solely on the CEO. It does not lie solely on the executive director. It does not lie solely on your fundraising team. Everybody has the opportunity to think innovatively and creatively about the way you're using your assets and how you can make those profitable for the organization. So to build a 90-day plan, this is where hopefully you'll take some information from this that you can utilize back at your specific organization, but assess where you are right now. Look at what your revenue mix is, identify where the risks are, analyze your donor file, dig deep and see who needs to have special touches again, who hasn't been talked to in a while, review your corporate prospects, and then identify that one hidden asset. Look at one right now. Try to eat the elephant one bite at a time. What is one thing that you can focus on in the next 90 days that you can bring to fruition? And in months 2 and 3, launch and scale that. So look at launch one new strategy and then build your sponsor pipeline and create a recurring giving campaign. So this is where I would focus on the monthly giving and then measure, adjust, scale, and repeat. The beautiful thing about nonprofit fundraising is it typically follows the same patterns. If we build the relationships, if we make people feel welcomed, the key piece is understanding what makes those different donors feel engaged and feel a part and make sure that we're talking the language that's important to them and not just spewing our own nonprofit language and wanting them to buy into it. But what makes this meaningful for them as a donor or them as a corporate partner, or them as a foundation, and what is the impact that they're making? At that end of the 90 days, assess how what you've just focused on building has been working and adjust. If it worked, keep doing it. If it hasn't worked, figure out what you need to, if it can be redefined and reworked, try it. If it's just a no-go, don't feel guilty in cutting it if it's not working after 90 days. I think in nonprofit too, we also tend to hold on to things long after they've lived their purpose. And so don't be afraid to cut it after 90 days if it's not working and identify those additional opportunities.
Yeah, don't be afraid to harvest.
Yes.
Harvest in the fall, and you hit it right on the nose. We've always done it for the last 10 years, last 20 years. That's tradition. If it's not working and it's not bringing in the revenues you want or more expenses and it's not bringing in new partners or anything of that sort, feel free to think about harvesting. It is difficult to do, but in every company I've been at, we have been able to do better because we did harvest things that are just no longer wanted or needed.
I'm a firm believer in the fact that this is the way we've always done things is the most dangerous phrase in the English language. So yeah, this is just part of that exercise to complete, and I believe that the slides will be shared so you can do that with your team. Again, so just some key takeaways. Diversification reduces risk. Relationships outperform transactions every time. Earned revenue creates mission expansion. And mission major gifts, and all gifts require intentionality. So looking at your corporate partnerships or what's next, how can you reinvent those? Looking at how you can be innovative. We're in unprecedented times. I'm with everybody and sick of living through unprecedented times, but innovation is where we really need to live right now. Find where your hidden assets are hiding and then start with one. Eat the elephant one bite at a time, figure out what works, and then really lean into that. And then final thought,
Right.
the organizations that thrive over the next decade won't be the largest ones. They'll be the ones that built intentional, resilient, diversified revenue ecosystems with the imagination to find revenue in the assets that they already have. So it's not reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. It's leaning into what you have, leaning into what you can be successful with. And like Warren said, not being afraid of when things aren't working to cut them off. They don't let things drain your organization just because it's something that's been there forever. All right. With that, we will turn it back over.
Thank you both. This is an incredible wealth of information with so many specific examples and so many ideas for nonprofit organizations. I'm just going to share one question with you, and we'll see if we have time for a few more. But how do you get your board to buy in if they don't understand the space? This person says they're new to their role, stepping into a space where they have no structure and have never really had a plan. I've made suggestions, including board training, that keep getting shot down, or they want money now and are not looking forward, or seem to be interested in actually creating a sustainable plan. I'm not sure what to do at this point. This is just They just want to know how many grants I have applied to. So, what suggestions might you have for this participant?
Well, one thing that I would suggest is look for that easy win, that W where you can bring something in that even though the board may not be enthralled by it, or even though they may say, how many grants do you have? See what you can bring in as a quick win and show them some of the things that you can do that are different, that are going to bring in more and more. Add on to that?
I have leaned into best practices for a long time. I kind of walked into a similar situation at an organization where the organization has continued to grow, but the fundraising aspect has not. For the last 11 years, raised the same amount of money. The team has been the same. It's been the same grants, same funders, everything. But the board was sitting there saying, well, we're bringing you in to raise more money. And so where I started, and it was the same thing. So we want to apply for more grants. And my pushback was, are the programs ready? Can we sell the programs, first of all? And bringing to the table what funders are actually looking for. So when I laid out on the table, here's what's getting funded in these large multi-year grants, in the grants that are given, the organizations that are giving six figures for 3 to 5 years. These are the type of programs, these are the population numbers that are getting funded. So unless we're in this space, we're not ready to apply for those type of grants. And then I went back and built an entire strategic plan for my department that showed a diversified revenue stream. It also included the investment in the infrastructure that we needed to make as an organization to do that. But the kicker was a big chunk of that was a revitalization of board expectations. So in almost every organization that I've been to, I built a board expectation form where instead of we moved beyond just every board member has a give get, we actually sat down with every board member. We went through what events they were going to be involved in, what sponsors they were going to bring in, what corporate partners they were going to make introductions to. We asked every single board member to host a donor engagement event at their home, their business, somewhere along that line. So the beautiful thing about that was it set the expectation of what board members were expected to do, which made the CEO look at how the board should be functioning differently. But it also made a lot of our board members self-select out because what they were doing was holding seats because they wanted to build their resume, but they didn't actually want to do the work that we needed board members to do. So I empathize. It gets very frustrating, but I kept going back to best practices. I kept going back to the strategic plan that I built, and I kept going back to how the strategic plan that I built supported the strategic plan of the organization.
Add on to that, use your bookkeeping, your accounting, and show them numbers. I'll use an example. Many years ago, I wanted our membership of the organization that I was working at to be allowed to pay their annual dues over a monthly or quarterly time frame. Well, the average American pays things on time, but this organization said, no, we can't do that. They won't pay. We have to just have it at one time. What we did was we put numbers together. We used best practices as Brandi just brought forth, and we showed them not only will we retain members more than we did in the past, we also added revenues to the organization because for those quarterly member dues, we had an additional charge of just maybe $5 or $10, but that added up to, for the organization, over $300,000 per year. So it took numbers, showing the board of directors numbers that could show this is going to be something that's not only going to bring in revenue, it's actually going to bring in net revenue after expenses.
Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, Brandy, if you could stop sharing your screen, then we can see your
Oh,
face
sorry.
a little bit closer. But I think we have time for one last quick question before I do surveys. But this participant says they would actually be interested in learning more about what suggestions you have for increasing our revenue from memberships. Do you have ideas for how to decide on what rates to charge for membership? What platform do you recommend for membership management?
Um, I think it would, I would need to know a little bit more about what the current rates are, what the offerings are of the membership. I am always going to be a big proponent of build with, not for. So I would suggest creating a focus group of members to identify, get feedback from them. What are they looking for as far as benefits go? What does a comfortable rate feel like for them? What are kind of those more elite levels that individuals would feel more confident or comfortable paying for? It just, especially in today's world when things are so, I mean, people are choosing to keep their lights on over membership. So understanding from our supporters directly what is important for them, what would be the biggest pieces for them, I think would be the first place that I would start is just getting feedback from those folks. I am never going to be the proponent of let's make decisions at the top level and then push it down and then sit back and wonder why. I would engage the stakeholders in those initial conversations early.
And you might find out from those stakeholders through those focus groups that Brandy mentioned, what you might find out is that they have different levels of membership. You know, you may have just one right now, and maybe there's different ones. Maybe there's core members, maybe there's partnership members, maybe there's retired members, such as I still belong to the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, but I am a retired member, and that is just a different membership fee.
Or even as are you an organization that there's also other entities that like if I had a membership to your institution, I would also be interested in one here, here, and here.
Mm.
So can you build a collaborative partnership where you attract a whole new group? Because I know like those
Right
day
here.
passes
Yes,
where you
Field
can
Museum.
access Field Museum, Shed, everything. Those are hugely popular. So yeah, I would start with the folks that are paying for those memberships first and learning from them what they're looking for and how you can best maximize their benefits. Um, yeah, that's where I would start.
Well, again, thank you both. Such a wealth of information, and this presentation and the resources will be posted on our website and our YouTube channel, as well as the slide deck. Before you go, though, I have a quick 6 survey questions for you to answer. This is incredibly helpful, this feedback, as we build this program, learn what resonated with you, what you want to learn more about, and other topics of interest. So we're just going to ask you 6 quick questions. So first question, what topics or practices would you be interested in for future Meeting the Moment sessions? And again, just taking a few minutes or a few seconds to fill in some ideas is incredibly helpful to us. Okay, great. How relevant was this session to your work, your role or work? Very relevant, somewhat relevant, neutral, slightly relevant, or not relevant? Great. Next question. Overall, how would you rate the session? Excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? Okay. What is one idea, tool, or insight from this session that you plan to apply or explore further? Again, just a short answer is really helpful. What would you like to learn more about related to this topic? A deeper dive into this topic, practical examples or case studies, tools, templates, or resources, opportunities for discussion or peer learning, a different or related topic? And then last question. After this session, how confident do you feel about applying what you learned? Much more confident, somewhat more confident, no change, less confident. All right, great. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Brandi and Warren, for a wonderful presentation. Again, you can find this presentation on the Chicago Cultural Alliance website or our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to and see this presentation and all the presentations from Meeting the Moment. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.